What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Adventures in Drunk Fish Keeping. That is refreshing. So, tonight's video, talking about one of the biggest questions that gets asked in the hobby for new people, and that is, how big of a tank should I get? And that comes down to real simple things. How much money do you have? How much space do you have? And how much time are you willing to spend in the hobby? A lot of people get really interested in the hobby, but then they go, how big should I go? Should I get a 30-gallon tank? Should I get a 40-gallon tank? Should I get a 55? Should I get a 75? Should I get a 120? It's kind of the big popular sizes that I see is somebody getting a 20-gallon tank, a 40-gallon tank, a 55 or a 75 or a 120. To that I'd say, know your budget. And that's the biggest thing, is know your budget, because this hobby can get very expensive very quickly. When you get into lighting and equipment, you can easily spend $1,000 on a tank that's 55 gallons. I mean, I've seen it done. You could go out tomorrow and buy a 55-gallon tank with a stand and a sump with a light and a pump and a protein skimmer and rock and your substrate, and you'd be sitting real close to $1,000 real quick. And it's not that hard to do. And I say that from someone who's kind of been through both sides of it, buying brand new and buying used, and I've seen it both ways. That's the first thing I'd say to anyone new in the hobby. Figure out your budget. Figure out what you want to spend in the hobby and what you want to make from the hobby. If you've only got a few $100s, it's more beneficial to go with a smaller tank that you can focus a lot more of that money on. So for example, if you're someone who says, I've got $500 to put into the hobby to start off, and maybe an additional $30 a month that I can put into the hobby, start with a 55-gallon tank. It's the best way to go. Or a 40 breeder, if you can get one, start with that. Start with a 40 breeder or 55. It's a great tank to start with. You can do a lot with that kind of a tank. You can get the look you want and accomplish a lot with that. If you're going to go freshwater, I'd say if you're going to go a 45 or a 40 or a 55, go with a tank and stand. Probably go with a canister filter. A little bit cheaper up front on the canister. I wouldn't go much bigger than probably a 55 with a canister filter. But some people have done 75s and bigger with a canister. If they have a low waste fish, if you got like a large freshwater tropical community with tetras and barbs and angelfish, things like that, they're not very messy eaters, good. If you got a lot of cichlids, things like that, they're going to make a mess. Bashars, things they're going to eat raw, want to spit waste out a lot, you're probably going to want to go a sump, just because you're going to get a better filtration setup, and on top of that, you're probably going to end up with just a better setup in general. Another thing is, look at what you want out of the hobby. I mean, I've jumped into the hobby with nano tanks, and I had at one point, if you've watched the channel, 6 tanks. I had two 2.5-gallon tanks, a 15, a 20, a 54, and something else. I can't remember the tanks I've had. And then I've changed. I went from having a 15-gallon Fluval Flex as my first tank. That was my first tank I got. I was going to start with that, and that was going to get me into the hobby. And I immediately put that tank together, stocked it, and was like, damn, I want more. So I went and got two 2.5-gallon tanks. One of the 2.5-gallon tanks I set up as a grow out tank for some Apistogrammas, some triple red cockatoo cichlids that I found at a really good price. The other tank I did really with a couple live plants and like 4 neon tetras. Put it on my nightstand. It was a great tank to look at when I went to bed. That tank was okay. I mean, it was a novelty tank for me. There's enough room for those fish to swim around in, but I wouldn't do anything else with it. Ended up actually converting it over for a single betta tank, which did a lot better. but those were cheap tanks. You know, I probably had less than $50 in those entire setups, which is, you know, for a 2.5 gallon tank, it's kind of a lot of money, but you know, I was buying them brand new. And if you've watched my channel, when I first got the old 54 here, I got that at PetSmart on a deal. They were doing the Memorial Day sale, which is coming up here soon. And I got the tank stand with canopy and light for about $225. It's not a bad deal for a 54 gallon tank. I could have bought a 75 gallon tank for that price, which is kind of what I should have done, but still new in the hobby and new to what I wanted to do. I thought the 54 would look cool because I was actually going to do this as a planted freshwater tank, and then said, screw it, I'm going to do salt. And started the adventure of doing saltwater tanks. And that really brings me to the big focus point of money and what to spend. I spent $225 to start off before substrates or rock or, oh man, smoked cheeseburgers and coffee stouts. They will do the trick for you. But I basically kind of got started in this kind of on the cheap side, you know. And that kind of brings me to the point, the meat of the video, the real juicy meat is showing a comparison side of things. So this is a 29 gallon BioCube. Great starter tank. It is actually just still running, so it can be sold easily without having to recycle a tank. This is my girlfriend's starter tank. Found this for her. $40 for the tank, probably another 15, 20 in rock and sand. Add in a light for about $50 and throw in probably about another 30 for filtration on the back with your heater. And she had a working reef tank. That is delicious. She had a working reef tank, ready to go, ready to rock and roll. You know, got the tank for her. She was wanting to get into the hobby, and I figured she was going to be one of those buy a little bit here and there type people. Completely wrong. She bought stuff quicker than she could put it in the tank, and she ended up going from having the tank with nothing in it to within a week's time having 2 pieces of coral and a clownfish, which was a gold lightning maroon, which is in the 54 now, and having a diamond goby within a week. And then she let those kind of settle in. Ended up doing a green clown goby, letting him settle in. Did 2 firefish, let them settle in. Did a Lubbock's wrasse, let him settle in. And then she finished it off with a few inverts, such as like a trocus, a margarita snail, and a electric blue Halloween hermit crab. That was what she started off with. The other week, we went to our local fish store, fish room here in Wilmington, North Carolina, and they had a rainbow urchin, probably about 4 inches in diameter, probably about that big around. She wanted it badly, so she got it and brought it home, put it in her 30 gallon, and that's when I saw it and made the comment of, it's a little much for that tank, and offered the 54 to her. So she has since transferred over to the 54 and also brought her light as well. And just to show you guys, so this is the 54 now, with her rock work, with a few small additional pieces that I had sitting around, with her coral, same fish setup, except she did add a small yellow tang and a leopard grass that she got the other day. And she also took her light off, which if you guys haven't seen this is a HD Prime. It's made by Aqualumination. It's or Hydra HD Prime. Same people that do the Hydra 26s and 52s. The difference between the 26 and the Prime is that you've got 1 LED pod versus 2 LED pods. Cool thing about this is has the heat sink around the outside edge with a built-in top fan. Still fully digital and still controllable through the My AI network, which is what makes these guys so cool. You can fully schedule the AI Prime. But what made this tank cool is that she outgrew her initial start to the hobby very quickly. she had planned for taking her time in the 30 gallon, but she came into like, hey, I've got some spare money for the hobby, so I put into it. People will have that sometimes. You're like, well, I've got $20 a month I can put into the hobby. Well, then you turn around and go, well, maybe I got $50 a month to put in the hobby, or 60 or 70 or 80 extra dollars a month I can put into my hobby. And that is buying an inverter, buying a piece of core, buying a fish you really want. And next thing you know, you're like, man, I got a stuffed tank. I can't put anything else in my tank. My tank is stuffed. What else can I put in my tank? My tank is full. And then you go, man, I wish I wanted a bigger tank. She was lucky that, you know, obviously I had a 54 sitting here that was cycled, ready to go. She could just dump fish into and put her whole setup in. Not everybody's got that, you know. She's even worried about some of her fish now outgrowing the 54, and I'm going, well, you got a 120 sitting beside you can kind of back up into, but not everybody has that. So that kind of is the big point. If you're going to get into the hobby, pay attention to what you want to do. You know, if you can afford a 55 gallon, start with a 55 gallon. Plan accordingly to what you're going to do with a 55 gallon. If you can afford a 120, get a 120. Now, granted, this hobby can get stupid expensive. I mean, case in point, a brand new 120, if you're going to go buy one brand new, drilled, you know, with like a single or dual overflow, you're looking anywhere from a $850 to a $1,000 tank. You know, if you go with a rimless with like low iron glass, you're talking a $1,200 tank all day long, before stand, before lights, before filtration. You're spending $1,200. And you could go over and get a 55 gallon tank or 75 gallon tank, you know, brand new for like 200. Well, with this, like with a stand. I mean, you could go and get a used one, probably the same kind of price, for like a 75 for like $300 or $400 with all the stuff you need. So that's really the big point of tonight's video. You know, plan accordingly to the hobby. Plan according to what you want to do with the hobby. If you're gonna go, man, I want a 20 gallon tank, I just want to have a couple of really cool freshwater guys, or like a couple nano saltwater guys, cool little setup, go with the 20. Do what you gotta do. The 40 breeder, there's no shame in the game here, because it's what you want out of the hobby. You know, if it was my choice, if I had just unlimited funds, I would have a 500 gallon tank here. It would literally be a wall, 2-wall, 10 foot by 5 foot by 4 foot deep tank. That would be my setup. I would have tangs and all sorts of cool stuff floating in it, but that is a $5,000 setup, and I don't have $5,000 to throw into the hobby at the moment. But that comes back to the original point of the video. Know what you want out of the hobby. You know, no shame in the game. If you do a 20 gallon tank, make it your tank. If you do a 120 gallon tank, make it your tank. If you do, as I've said before, these weird ass bow shaped corner tanks that I hate, do it to it. Make it yours. Because at the end of the day, the hobby is about enjoying what you want out of it, and also about making sure that your fish have a good comfort and quality of life. You know, don't go crazy. You know, obviously, if all you can afford is a 55 gallon tank, don't put like, a pleco in that. Don't put a full grown pleco. Don't put a cat shark. You know, don't do anything crazy in a tiny tank. Now, if you can afford a 500 gallon tank, coral banded cat shark all day long. If you can only afford a 55, stick with the yellow tang. It's, you know, simple stuff. Because at the end of the day, we are taking these guys out of a wild habitat and putting them in a big box. So you got to think what you want out of the hobby for yourself, and for, obviously, for the fish you're keeping. But, you know, ending this video tonight, basically, you've got different tanks to fit different sizes to fit the hobby that you want to do. So make it your own, enjoy what you do, and have fun with it, because that's why we do this. We do this to have fun. We do this to relax, and if we didn't do it, then, you know, someone else would, but enjoy it in the way you do it. This is, once again, Adventures in Drunk Fish Keeping. As always, that is refreshing, guys.